Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Today let's solve it at the Leet code question. The description of the question is as follows: that we were given two grids, grid 1 and grid 2, which are of same size m by n, and obviously we do know that within a grid, if 0 is there then it represents water and 1 is there then it represents land. Island is group of ones connected four directionally, which is horizontal and vertical, or vertical, I'm sorry, and iron cells outside of grid are considered as water cells. So an island in grid 2 is considered as a sub-island if there's an island in grid 1 that contains all cells that make up in grid 2. So that could be seen in the first example. So just let's solve the first. I'll just write some note points over here. The first being grid 1 and grid 2 are of same size. The second point being uh, the island in grid 2 is called sub-island if it is a part of grid 1 which already is an island. So for having this verified, what I'll do is, first of all, for each grid in for each island in grid 1, I'll assign it a unique identifier. So I'll just write my process of solving the problem. Out of this, step 1 would be assign. Why would I assign unique identifier to each island in grid 1 is because I'll just check if in my grid 2 that island belongs to the exact identified island in grid 1 or not. If it belongs to the same exact identified island, then then only it will be a sub island, right? Else it won't be a sub island. So I'll just write. I just mean to say if here 1 is there, then obviously this won't be a sub-island of this because here we are having 1 and here 1 is not there. So then that case, that won't be a sub-island. A unique identifier will be assigned to each island in grid 1. So that's how I'm trying to do this. In assign identifier, grid 1, I'll just call it a grid. I obviously do not need to return anything. I'll just call it void. I'll just call row dot size to be grid row dot size and column to be grid 0 dot size, and I'll just call an identifier. I'll just start giving identifier from 2 instead of 1 because 1 represents an island, right? So I'll just give my identifiers from 2. So I'll just call int I equal to 0, I is less than row, I plus plus, and j is equals to 0, j less than column, j plus plus. I'll just check if my grid of I, j is 1. If my current grid is 1, then I'll assign it an identifier. So for assigning it an identifier, I'll just call other function. I'll just call helper for it. And it should be vector int grid. I should be having current row, current column, total number of rows, total number of columns. What else do I require? And I also do require identifier that I need to assign. So vector int drs of 4 should be -1 0 1 0 0 1 0 -1. So this is how it works, and these DRs are this because if being at a current cell, I could either move horizontally downward. Horizontally downward being my y value will be changing by -1, so 0 -1. I could also move vertically upward. Sorry, it's not horizontally; it's vertically downward, which would be 0 -1. Vertically upward, in that case, I would be adding 0 1. Horizontally right, I'll just add 1 0, and horizontally left, I'll add -1 0. So this is how it works. And after adding this, I'll also have a queue to make a BFS calls. I'll just store the current row in it. So it should be q dot push. My current elements would be I and j. I'll just add them over here. And while my queue elements become empty, I'll just call friend element to be q dot friend. You know that a queue is first in last out data structure, right? I mean, the last value to be entered in, sorry, it is a first in first out data structure, right? The first value to be entered will be the first value to be coming out. It could be considered as a bus queue. If you stood first in the bus queue, then you will be the first one to get a ticket. In the similar way, I'll just q dot pop from here, and in elements of dx, I'll just check dx to be element of 0 and dy to be element of 1. Here, what I'll check is if my and and grid of I'll just verify my current row plus dx. If I moved in that direction, should be greater than or equal to 0, and I plus dx should be less than rho. In the similar way, j plus dy should be greater than or equal to 0, and j plus dy should be less than column, and also grid of I plus dx and j plus dy should be equal to 1. If in that case my corresponding cell is also 1, so that's also part of this island. In that case, what I'll do is I'll just assign grid of I plus dx j plus dy to be my identifier, and I'll just push my current cell into queue so that I could explore that cell as well. So I could explore the neighboring cells of that cell as well. So this is how it works. Let me just verify if there's any mistake or not. Here I'll just assign grid of ij to be my identifier. Mm, I guess it should prettily work fine. And if it's grid of ij is equals to 1, then what I'll do is I'll just call helper of a current grid followed by id. id, I'll just pass it id plus plus so that it will automatically incremented after that loop got executed. Ij, and my current row being the current row, column being the current column. So after assigning it identifier, assign identifier, and that should be grid 1. So int row to be grid 1 dot size, int call to be grid 1 of I 0 dot size. For int I equal to, I'll just verify if everything is working fine or not. I plus plus. For int j equal to 0, j is less than call, j plus plus. C out is less than grid 1 of I, j is less than, and C out is less than endl, and I'll just return -1. I'll just verify if everything is working fine or not. Uh, this every value should be 2, but I'm not sure why I'm getting 2, 2, 3, 4 these values. Let me just check it out, what mistake I'm making over here. So if it's equals to 1, then I'm just grid of ij is also given by id, right? Okay. Okay, this should not be I, right? This should be friend dot first. And instead of I, here it should be friend dot first, because that's wherein I'm getting my current X from. So I should be replaced by friend dot first, and J should be replaced by friend dot second. Friend dot second, and here as well, it's friend dot second, and this should be friend dot first, and this should be friend dot second. In a similar way, this is to be friend dot first, and this is to be friend dot second, and this is to be friend dot first, and this is to be friend dot second. That's how it now everything I guess should be working fine as expected. So it's working as expected. After assigning identifier, what we'll do is we'll just traverse through every element within the grid 2. So I'll just call it answer is equals to 0, and I'll use the same helper function, but now I'll just call it validate. So how validate will be working, I'll just explain you in a second. I'm not sure why it isn't pasted. So this should be bool. I'll just call it helper grid IJ, and that's pretty much obvious of it. And here I'll also call vector int check. So instead of identifier, I'll just call it check. And here, if my grid of ij is equals to 1, I'll just initialize boolean result were true. So what this result will be helping me to find out is, so once I found it an island, I'll just check the corresponding identifier that's configured in grid 1. I'll just check if both of them are true or not. If both of them are true, then only my result would be valid. If not, my result would not be valid. I'm not sure why I'm making a change over here. That should ideally be made over here. I'll just call bool, and this should be vector in check. And here, right, here bool result to be true, and I'll return the same result to just find if it's a sub result or sub island or not. So that's how it works. And now everything is working as expected, right? And this is checker which is corresponding to this one. So I'll just call this shouldn't be the case now, and int id should be check of ij, right? Because that's the identifier that we assigned in grid 1. So I'll just call it, if I'm just checking if my grid of ij is equal to 1, then my result would be result, and I'll just check if my friend dot first and friend dot second is equivalent to my current ID. If that's equivalent to current ID, then only it belongs to the same island group. So that would be a same sub island. So I'll just check here, that should be equivalent to ID, and I'll just check here if my grid 2 of IJ to be equivalent to 1, and grid 1 of ij should not be equal to 0. If it's not equal to 0, then there won't be any valid case, because I'm just considering the land with water in that case, and which is kind of not possible, right? So I'll just call helper of, and grid 2 should be coming out first, followed by grid 1. My I currently would be same ij row column, so that would be ij row column, and I'll just return the answer. I'll just find it out if anything is missing over this point or not. Maybe we made a small mistake over here. So in this helper function, I'll just call helper count over here to reduce any dissimilarity or misconfiguration that we might be having. And here I'm just int id would be equivalent to this, right? And I'm just checking that with ID. So ID isn't configured. Check friend dot first. So result will be true over there. Just a second. I'm just verifying where I'm proceeding wrong. And Grid of I is equals to 1. Grid 1 of this should not be equal to 0. Why I'm checking for equivalent to 0. There's no grid 1. Vector int helper. Acha, it should be helper count. Oh, it should be helper count. So while returning, I'm just returning the boolean value. So if it's true, then 1 will be added to the answer. If it's false, then nothing would be added to the answer. So this is how it works. For fairly reducing the time taken to run our code, I'm just specifying the C++ compiler not to import any libraries from C that will be useful for taking input and giving output. So I'll just call cin.tie to be null, followed by cout.tie also to be null. So I'll just submit this out. Everything is working as expected. Thank you. Feel free to add anything in the comment section if you think anything is unclear. Thank you.